But the argument goes that if we need to reinforce their games, we need to make them feel comfortable with it, because otherwise they're going to get depressed and they'll commit suicide. Well, I would submit to you that if people living sinful lives are committing suicide, they need to get out of the depression by stopping the sin and by coming to Christ. They need to not reduce the harm in their lives, they need to eliminate the harm in their lives. They need to change. And we think we're helping people by reinforcing their perversion. We are sending them to hell, and we are making their life that much more miserable. The average life expectancy of a homosexual male in North America is 55 years old. 55. That gives you less time than a 3-pack-a-day smoker. That gives you less time than a guy who downs a bottle of whiskey a day. Why is that? Because of all the diseases that are associated with that lifestyle, along with the concomitant lifestyle choices they make with things like drugs, alcohol, and smoking, which all seem to go part and parcel with that lifestyle. 55. Now, is that the kind of lifestyle we want to reinforce in our school system? No. And it's time we stop that. Next slide. Now, I talked about Bill C-389 when I was tap dancing here at the beginning. But that's, well, I think we have some optimism. I think we have room for optimism here. Once again, I was surprised at this by Dr. McBeatty in Toronto, who I helped behind the scenes do a little research and some work on this, and to talk to some of the people moving this bill in the House of Commons. You know, the effect of the discussion of this, maybe some of you have seen it, it hasn't really come to the forefront in television news, but it's been on the front page of the Globe and Mail, from the Star and Sun, other papers have talked about it. And the reaction that Bill 6A wanted, who is a ardent homosexual and ardent homosexual activist, his whole raison d'etre for being in politics is to promote the homosexual agenda, just like his predecessor, Stan Robinson. I think he was wondering, what is the reaction going to be? The next slide, please. So my question this morning, and will remain until we see what happens, is this a trial balloon? Because the response he's getting from a lot of reporters, even who are left-wing reporters who are not sympathetic to Christians, has been, you know, this doesn't seem to sit well with me, because I don't think I want to go into a change room and some guy comes in and says, I feel like a woman today, and proves it. I don't think this is really going to work. And I think 6A thought this was going to be an easy pitch. Why not? Haven't we come far enough yet? Well, thank God, maybe we have. And maybe this is an issue that Christians and those who support these ideas can come together on and stop. Because I think this is so ridiculous. It's almost a parody of bad legislation. And when I first heard it, I thought it was a joke. I said, you can't be serious. But they're very serious. And they're always trying, people pushing this kind of legislation are always seeing how far can they go before somebody says, whoa! And believe me, they're cowards at heart. Once you do stand up and you say, stop, they do. They do stop, because they use fear and intimidation tactics. They'll call you homophobic. They'll say you have no respect for human rights, that you deny the basic human rights provided by the Constitution of Canada. They resort to name calling. But I submit that this is another indication of where this agenda, where these people are going, and that's protection, ultimately, of pedophiles. And you say, I don't believe it. Well, if I had spoken to a congregation 20 years ago and said, we're going to have same-sex marriage by 2005, it's going to be technically illegal to criticize homosexual behavior by 2005, and we're also going to move on to protecting the rights of the transgender. People would have said, what's that? It wouldn't be, the terminology wouldn't even be in vogue yet. But the idea here is, once again, to protect rights that do not exist. Now, Prior to the legalization of homosexuality in Canada in 1968, I don't think we had a mass system of concentration camps housing homosexuals. Simply, it was a law in the books that merely restrained homosexual behavior in public places. That's all it ever did. So in other words, when you had inappropriate behavior going on in a public bathroom, the police could arrest you. Now, we didn't haul off masses of homosexuals and throw them into prison camps. It never happened. Just like I don't think there's a lot of so-called transgender people being arrested every day because their basic civil liberties are being violated. This is how it's all a crock. None of these people are having their basic civil liberties violated. None of them. They all have the right to life, liberty. They all have the right to guarantee the Charter of Rights. Nobody's taking their voting rights away. Nobody's telling them they can't own land. Nobody's telling them they can't vote. Nobody's telling them they can't act like a regular citizen. All we're saying is that if you're engaged in this kind of behavior, it's not protected by the law. Because once you open the law and once you legislate in these areas, anything is possible. Anything is possible because it's open to interpretation. It's just like now when we say that we cannot criticize somebody on their basis of their sexual orientation. What does sexual orientation mean? What does that mean? Well, somebody might say, well, obviously it means if one declares themselves to be homosexual or bisexual. Why is that obvious? What if I declare myself to be something? What if I declare that I like animals? Or what if I declare that I like something else? Is that not a sexual orientation? Who's to say that I can't declare that? And once we've made the law open to that kind of declaration, all hell breaks loose. And this is why this is not an expansion of human rights. It's a limitation of human rights. We are saying that one law for all human beings and all Canadians is no longer sufficient. We have to have different protection, different kinds of laws for every kind of perversion that exists out there. And this is why it is creating a quagmire of legislative nonsense. And why it's time to say there's no need to expand the definition of human rights. We already have a definition of human rights that works in practice for everybody. And we do not need to open it any further. Next slide, please. I've talked about where I'm going, and Lord willing, if this is His will, I will be moving on in 2011 to other things. I don't know. That is between a lot of factors right now. But I do feel God leading me back, either in a part-time function or full-time. With Conservative Values Canada, I'm not here to fundraise, but just to mention what Canada needs and what we've always lacked is unity amongst the Christian forces. And we need an organization that is not simply sticking to one single issue, but envelops them all. That brings together the churches that want to fight for these things. And I tell you, we've got so-called Christian organizations lobbying for us in Ottawa right now, and they're lobbying for the wrong things. They really are. And you'd be shocked to find out. Like there's an evangelical organization, probably the leading one in the country right now, with office space 5 blocks from Parliament Hill, that is refusing to criticize or to oppose this Bill C-389. Because, well, we don't want to be appearing to oppose human rights legislation. Now, there's a problem here. Now, are these people crazy, or are they willfully ignorant, or are they just on the wrong side? And I tell you, just as people can be elected from small-town Alberta, small-town Ontario, and come here to Ottawa, and we call it Ottawashed. You ever heard that expression? They become Ottawashed. In other words, they come here and they have their minds changed. You ever saw that movie, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, that old science? That's what it's like. They come here and they say, you know, I have strong principles on that. I'm pro-life, and I don't think we should be extending protection to this. And I believe in the Christian family, and I support my church. And 5 years later, they're suddenly talking if they ever got a government in Ottawa. And that's because of the pervasive influence of this in politics. And the same thing happens to a lot of Christian people when they get stranded and they become just another cocktail party circuit. And where they no longer remember what we're supposed to be. we have got to know, we've got to understand the enemy and understand what this is about. So this may be where I'm going. The next slide. Last but not least, I have often talked about this issue over the years, not just in 2010, but also when I was speaking on this in 2005. And I had a lot of people come to me and they say, "What are you wasting your time for, Brother Craig? Why are you bothering to even get into this? Haven't you read the Bible?" Yes. "Well, don't you know we're going to lose all this in the end, but then Christ is going to come back and turn it all around, and it's all going to be okay. So just cool it. Sit back, watch it all go to hell, because we know how it all going to turn out anyway. Doesn't really matter." Well, that might not be the most articulate argument, but it certainly has some persuasion for some people. And I can understand why a lot of people would say, "Well, why should we care? The world's going to be the world. Sinners are going to be sinners. We can try to bring as many people to Christ in the meantime, but if there's only 12 of us left in the end, there's only 12 of us left in the end. We're all going to go to heaven." But, I wonder if this persecution, if the people are always like they're waiting around for this persecution to start. And I always hear, that church in China, my goodness, they're so dynamic because of the persecution of the regime. Or think about the church in the Soviet Union. It was strong because it had to survive the persecution. Or think about the church in the Middle Ages during the Inquisition. Boy, it took real faith to stand up to